we're seeing a fraying of relations between the U.S. and India on the back of India's purchases of Russian oil. I'm just wondering how do you see this story developing? Because India's been pretty adamant about continuing the purchases.
Yeah, well, first of all, Haslinda, I'm a bit surprised at how misinformed some of these public statements coming out of Trump's senior officials appear to be in terms of understanding market dynamics, even awareness that in 2022, when the US led the G7 to impose strict embargoes and sanctions and the price cap on Russian oil, they actually needed and wanted India and China to absorb all the Russian crude that was now being shut out of Europe. They heaved a sigh of relief that India was able to do that, and now completely singing a different tune and sort of pretending that how did this happen? Haslinda, how much time do you have? I could go into this. And Europe is still buying billions, tens of billions of dollars in annual purchases of Russian LNG, directly, mind you, Russian LNG, fertilizers, metals, nuclear materials, and so on. So the policy is all over the place. And you're right. Yes, India is pushing back. I expect them to continue pushing back. Also, it's going to be very bad optics for Trump if he imposes the secondary tariffs on India for buying Russian oil and doesn't do so on China, which is a bigger buyer of Russian oil, simply because, who knows, he's a little more intimidated by how China might react.
Isn't it difficult for India to undo those purchases as well? Because Russian oil now accounts for up to 40% of its oil imports.
Actually, no, it's not. India could very easily go back to where it was pre-2022, when it was buying zero Russian oil, Haslinda. So India could just simply go back to, not all the producers, especially the OPEC Plus group, have spare capacity, but the Middle Eastern producers who have provided the bulk, the mainstay of India's crude imports for decades, like Saudi Arabia, UAE, Iraq, they could certainly, start putting more barrels into the Indian market. So it's not an issue. I think where it will hurt is that the discounts that the Indian refiners have been enjoying with more than a third of their crude coming from Russia over the past couple of years, that discount will disappear. The big question is, what will that do to global oil prices and pump prices in the US? And, how is Trump going to handle that?
Vandana, as always, great perspective. Vandana Hari, founder of Vanda Insights. Now, staying with India, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has struck a defiant tone in the face of President Trump's 25% tariff rate. He's urging citizens to buy locally made goods while New Delhi continues to buy Russian oil. Bloomberg South Asia economy editor Ruchi Bhatia joins us now from the Indian capital. Ruchi, tell us more about this Modi's Buy India message and what this means for the government's wider strategy.
Well, absolutely right. U.S. President, you heard Vandana Hari also there talking about the U.S. President last week saying that it was good that India stopped buying Russian oil, but India making it very clear that the ties between India and Russia are, they've stood the test of time. They're very strong and stable over the last 7 decades. And perhaps the reason why we heard from Indian officials over the weekend saying and making it very clear that there's been no implicit instruction that has been given to Indian private or state-run oil refiners over Russian oil. Having said that, these comments coming in the backdrop of the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi making it very clear that, to overcome the geopolitical situation that we are in right now, Indians should look at buying more Indian goods. Remember, Atmanirbhar Bharat or Vocal for Local have been, long time slogans for this government. They've been trying very hard, but remember, India also buys a lot of imports or gets a lot of imports from China. So it will be a tough balancing act, even as India looks to navigate through this crisis that's, of course, playing out As I said, this is coming in the backdrop of Prime Minister Narendra Modi urging Indians once again to buy locally, to shield the Indian economy from the geopolitical crisis that is underway. And remember, the mood back home is also kind of shifting towards more economic nationalism in the wake of the India-US developments playing out. We really don't know where the relationship is headed, even as India has been maintaining that the talks with the US will continue. There is a trade delegation from the US that will be visiting India on the 25th of August. But this space is becoming more and more interesting, and it will be interesting, remember, Haslinda, to see as to whether India is really able to clinch that deal. Where do we go from the 25% tariffs, and what really happens to the undefined penalty that US has been talking about because India is buying more Russian oil?